Hello, my name is Mario, and I have a story to tell you. I'm a rare breed. I'm a graphic designosaurus. You see, I graduated in graphic design before computers ruled the world. I currently work as the head of CX, design and strategy for Tribal DDB Singapore. I work with insights and creativity that are evidence-based and all geared towards designing better outcomes that improve the lives of people. I work with different brands and institutions, collaborate with different disciplines, different stakeholders, different departments, from directors to C-suites, to CEOs, to managers, engineers. And I lead teams in the support of that work. And those teams are also comprised of my peers, juniors, seniors, contractors. Really what I'm saying is my day-to-day kind of looks and feels a lot like this. Working in transformation design or service and experience design, I have to work with a lot of moving parts. And it's not always easy to keep all these moving parts together, synchronously focused towards delivering a successful outcome. So just last week, I was in a conversation with a project sponsor for a government project that we are currently doing. It's one of those classic digital transformation projects. And we both came to this conclusion. Our hardest effort comes in bringing everyone together, bringing everyone on board to the plan, to the vision. In other words, bringing everyone into a story. And then have everyone contribute to make the story better. And that work is done through conversations. Good conversations deliver what we want to create, what we want to design as an improved experience for others. We are the humans that design for other humans. So that story starts with us. And if we cannot share our own stories with each other, if we ourselves do not buy into the stories we create, whatever gets designed will not have much of a story for the user either. Stories start with us, the humans that design for other humans. Now this may seem obvious, but it's us people that make up conversations. It makes us users of conversations. And if we are users of a thing, should us user experience designers then not be perfectly poised to be masters of this thing called conversation? Well, not so. Communication is surprisingly difficult, even though we do it all the time. Even professionals in UX fall short in the UX of conversations. Before our designs have a story, we have meetings, discussions, arguments, misunderstandings about what that story needs to be. And those are the elements of the conversations that designers, engineers, directors, strategists, our clients, those are the elements that we bring into our conversations, discussions, arguments, misunderstandings. By nature, communication creates misunderstanding. So getting better at communicating, specifically getting better at conversations, is a key focus for me as a designer. There's a good book called How Google Works. Not surprisingly, Google spends millions of dollars trying to figure out what makes an effective team. What makes that possible? So one example that they did was they found all the most effective people, put them in a room together, gave them a problem, and then simply asked them to solve the problem. Funny enough, that group was not very effective at solving problems. Then they took another group of just random people, not your top performers. They're not specifically effective, not the smartest people in the room. And they put them together and gave them one rule. And that one rule created the most effective teams in Google today. So what's the one rule? The one rule was establish the rules. That's what Google discovered. The most effective teams and the most effective meetings happen when everyone in that team created rules on how they communicate, for how each of them tell their stories. So they would set out rules like before we are done with our meeting, everyone has to go around the room and say why they agree or why they disagree. Or when we introduce an idea, whoever introduces the idea must also introduce why the idea doesn't work. Every group had different rules, but the rules themselves were not as important as the fact that everyone in that team had agreed that that was how the group was going to be having their conversations. So today and for this conference, I would like to share some of my own personal rules that help me in designing better conversations that in turn allow me to design better outcomes for user experience design. Have you ever zoned out when someone else is speaking? Of course you have. We all do it. And perhaps some of you are doing this right now. There's a lot that will depend on the clarity of who is speaking, but listening is also hard because we're often consumed with ourselves. And when we are consumed with ourselves, we are not able to give attention to others. Listening involves quieting down your mind, dropping your agenda, and finding that urge to constantly and immediately debate. Debates, in my view, they are not conversations. They're more like competitions. One of us will lose. One of us will have to give in or agree to disagree. But a conversation should be a story where both of us feel an equal part of. And that can only happen if we make it an effort to hear each other out. So listening is good, but the intent has to be curiosity, a genuine interest in how the other person is thinking. If I make that effort to be genuinely curious about another person's thought, when I do that, I actually hear those thoughts. I hear their story. And that allows me to bring in more people into that conversation. I pull more people in the discussion. I will do things like ask, hey, how do we think about this? You seemed a little unimpressed with that idea. Let's talk about that. I would ask, how many people here want to table this? How many people want to continue work a bit more on that? Who agrees that this is very important? Constantly pulling in the room into the conversation, into the story. You can do that if your mind shifts towards curiosity. So for me, it is important to drop my agenda, pay attention, and invite people into the conversation, avoiding the debate trap. Question: why do we expect others to only see things the way we do? It's still much easier to reward people who say and do exactly what you wanted to say or do or wish you had, as opposed to rewarding people who say something or do something very different. It's because we like what people we like. And diversity challenges this. But when we figure this out, when we figure out how to celebrate differences and how to let people bring their best version of themselves forward, well, we will actually be truly collaborating, co-creating solutions, narratives, stories that we will all feel a part of. Turns out we're all somewhat reluctant to engage in behaviors that could negatively influence how others see our competence, our intelligence, our abilities. And although that's the kind of self-protection that almost feels natural in a workplace, it is detrimental to the success of effective teamwork. So it's one of my rules that I stay more invested in having others change my mind as opposed to me being only invested in trying to change theirs. So I'm about to categorize people into 4 different communication types. This is based on the book Persuasion IQ by Kurt Mordison. Now, are sometimes people in more than one category depending on their mood? Sure, but for the purpose of the talk, I want you to think about every person you work with, every person you have to go to and speak to in the next week or so. See if maybe you can fit them in one of these 4 types. The first style is the hostile person. So this is the person that isn't afraid to disagree with you openly. The kind of person that's like, I don't like this. That's not going to work. And whatever you say or whatever you bring in a conversation, they tend to respond by first saying no, wrong, cannot. I think we all know a person like that. The second communication style is the indifferent person. That's the person that with every look and in every response is literally just saying something like, so? Yeah? And? It's not that they're mean, but you cannot seem to get them to engage with what you're saying. The third communication style is the uninformed style. So that's the person that's always like, I'll get to that. I didn't have time yet. Or when they speak, they spin circles. And their logic doesn't hold up and they contradict themselves. So they make you feel that they're not really as informed as they present themselves to be. And the last one is the overly supportive person. That's the person that's all yeses, the yes person. Great idea. Oh, I think that's great, yes. I think we should make that happen. And then how? That's where the problem is. The person that is always supporting you but does not enable you. This is the person that's just yes, 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 but it's yes for everyone else too. Their yes holds no power. There are, of course, other types, but in my experience and in my own reflection, these are the types that I need to communicate better with. I need to work harder to communicate differently with them. The hostile one, the indifferent one, the uninformed one, and the overly supportive one. Because to me, those are the types of people I just don't have a natural comfort in communicating with. Some of them trigger me and I get forceful, even intimidating. Others just annoy me. I lose patience or even interest in involving them. I know we all share this. There are some types of people that we have a harder time with when we want to communicate with them, because it doesn't happen naturally or effortlessly. And it's nothing personal. I know that on every project I am, this will happen. And I have to find ways to communicate differently to involve these people, to involve them in the story of the ideas and the research findings that we are putting together. And that initiative, that is mine to take. I have to make an adjustment in how I listen and how I accept different thinking, different opinions, and then find ways to communicate objectively and collaboratively, not to debate, but to create a shared understanding, to create a story. As a designer, I am limited by the conversations that I cannot have, just as I am enabled by those that I can have. And so the more range we develop in our capacity of changing conversation techniques, the better our design outcomes will be. So how do we design better conversations in the practice and in the service of human-centered design? I can think of no more important role for a designer, because the work we do holds the potential and the capacity to improve the lives of people, perhaps even make meaningful change in the world. I invite you all to reflect on your own storytelling habits and how you listen to what you tend to agree to, if or how you change the way you communicate, or avoid it altogether because of feeling triggered or intimidated or annoyed. But we can only ever be understood if we communicate, if we share our story. Our project success depends on the conversations that we have about it. And we have to be intentional in doing that, so that we humans who design for other humans not only use the qualities of designing meaningful stories, communicating our own stories is inherently a human quality. And it's also what makes us feel at home. And as we challenge and are being challenged, the least we can ensure ourselves with is that we still feel at home in our profession, and that we use our conversation skills to create that feeling for everyone else. You are a wonderful audience, and I thank you for your attention.